Morning, Paul.
Morning.
Good. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good.
It's tennis ball day. Tennis ball. So I was training triceps the other day, and I
Oh,
and I've got like muscle damage right by my left elbow. So I've
okay.
got the tennis ball here on the table, and I keep rolling it back and forth, trying to ease that knot out of it.
Yeah.
But it's not having much of an effect. So
Yeah. I I've not worked out that hard enough to need that in a long time, but I completely understand.
time to get you back in the
So,
gym.
welcome to the workshop. I know. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about health and
Yeah, and
discipline.
maybe a little bit about knots that are difficult to untie, such as the one in my left elbow right now.
Yeah. Health and knots that are difficult to untie.
Believe it or not, they are related.
Are they?
Well, in some ways.
Okay. How's that?
I mean, I would never want to wax philosophical on the Thinker Growth Workshop. That's just not how we roll around here,
Well,
especially.
please, no. No, we don't have philosophical talks here.
Uh, well, a short story. When I was a teenager, um, I have a younger sister, 2 years younger than me, and she would wear dainty little necklaces. And sometimes she'd take them off and put them on her dresser or nightstand or whatever, and they'd get tangled up. And she would freak out. And this was one quality my dad noticed about me was, I was good at untangling bits of string and electrical cords and basically anything long, singular piece of material. It was all tangled up and tied up in knots. I had the patience and shall we say, just the intuitive sense of where to pull and how much to pull and how to not give up. And so my dad would tell my sister, "Go give it to Paul, and he'll get it untangled for you." Now, this was at a stage my sister and I get along a lot better now than we did then. This was at a stage where my sister didn't think I was useful for much at all. Um, and she was probably right in a lot of ways. But in this area, um, I put a couple of big smiles on her face because uh, every time she brought me one of these dainty little necklaces, all tangled up and almost on the verge of tears, and she'd bring it to me, and then about 30 minutes later, I'd say, "Here you go," swinging like a pendant, you know. And the look on her face and the gratitude she showed me was quite something, considering um, that we were both immature teenagers who didn't get along most of the time. And most of that was my fault. But I think now, here I am sitting here with this, I don't know if you call it tennis elbow or what. Feels like I've strained a ligament in my left arm, right by the elbow, right here. And so I've been using a lacrosse ball and a tennis ball. It's something I've learned in bodybuilding to try and loosen up the material. But sometimes, right, it's not the muscle, it's not muscular soreness. Sometimes it's the ligament. And sometimes it puts a knot there for a little while, telling you back off on this and don't try to, and not that it's not going to get better. I expect it to get better, but it's something that you've got to sit with for a while until it gets better by itself, until the wiring inside the body and the connection with the brain and the nerves have settled down, and the muscles and the tendons and all of that have had a chance to go back to just regular operations and not do. I wasn't lifting heavy, but I was following a protocol which challenges the muscles, and my muscles were not used to that. That particular muscle group, even though it's my left arm, which is my dominant arm, was not used to doing it that way. So it's just the body's way of saying some things you can't necessarily remedy right away, and you can't remedy by just applying more direct force from another location. Some things have to remedy themselves, and you just have to be prepared to sit and wait through that. And so, talking about health, I think life will puts a fair amount of circumstances like that in front of us all, to varying degrees and sizes and categories. And I'm blessed and grateful to have as good of a health as I have. But at the same time, there are always things, there are just little things that I've dealt with my whole life. And it's tempting to look around and say, well, that person doesn't deal with it. And then, they look how much easier they can do certain movements or that kind of thing than I can. And not realizing, of course, that there's probably another category where I'm stronger, faster, more explosive, more adept than they are. So that's the initial thought.
Yeah, I hear that. One of the things that stands out for me about what you're talking about is that concept of sometimes healing must come through rest.
Mm-hmm.
And your example of having a ligament that is now sore, or a tendon that's sore because you have strained the muscle that it is attached to, and the inflammation that comes into that space is there to help heal.
Mm-hmm.
And it increases blood flow and brings all of the resources that your body's going to want to heal that part of your body. But like you talk about, it can't just be rest in certain circumstances. Sometimes it needs to be rest with some sort of active stretching or active movement, like you talked about with the tennis ball. You're going to roll that out, which helps break up the inflammation. It helps break up the things which, if we don't continue to use them, they tend to scar and tend to get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we continue to use them, then they can retain some of their properties, such as the ability to stretch, to do a full range of motion. And I think, the thought that my mind centers around is the idea of inflammation. When we become injured, either through some sort of injury, that's bad for us, or some sort of growth because we worked hard, we worked a certain muscle hard, and now it's strained. The inflammation that comes around there is there to serve us, but it also is going to require some work to remove it and rest.
Yes.
And we can do things to speed it up and to enhance its ability to heal. But nevertheless, we have to rest. We have to let that inflammation that was there to serve our bodies, we have to let that inflammation go away.
Yeah.
Or we gain access to that muscle again.
So why this is why I want to pull on this thread a little bit more. You and I are in the midst of a recalibration of what we're doing with Emissary. And some of this may feel very familiar to you. Some of it may be like, this is the first time I've experienced this uniquely this way, or I don't know. I know quite a bit about your story, but intricate details always emerge when we talk like this. In the background, for me, is 6 years. I mean, it's June 2018 was the last time I had a full-time paying job. So this is 6 years of falling flat on my face, then getting a little bit better, getting some opportunities, starting to get what felt like traction, what felt like growth, and then it flatlined. Then getting nearly close to going out of business, coming back a little bit, but not enormously. Then you and I started working together. That added a whole new dimension to it. We have we've done a lot of great things. And yet I'm like, there's a part of my soul that feels a little injured. Like, is this all there is, right? Do I continue working this hard? Am I aggravating the problem by trying to do too much, right? And I don't have answers to any of this stuff. This is just the stuff that occurs to me. And so I think what you're saying there is very useful. You juxtaposed the need for rest with the simultaneous, or alternating might be the better word, need for working that muscle, not letting it atrophy, not letting it just sit idle, not letting it lie fallow, so to speak, but rather using it in a more refined and intelligent and nuanced and meaningful way that exercises it, leverages its strength, produces better results, but yet doesn't do as much for its own sake, perhaps, as it used to, because of the injury, right? In other words, the time that I would have previously spent doing is now a time to sit and think about what I'm doing. And then there's time for doing. So it's not that you don't do an either or, you do both. And you have to find what's the appropriate balance, what's the appropriate mixture there of doing things and then thinking about what I'm doing and saying, is this the best use of my time? Is this the best use of my energy? I feel like I've become a lot better at that in my personal life. But sometimes in business, it still feels to me like I'm doing too much for not enough result. And I think a lot of that goes back to, we realized we have to go back to and recalibrate according to what we were setting out to do. And there's more things to say no to than up until now we've been willing to say no to. Not because those things are bad, but just because it's not what we're after. So there's the parallel that I'm hearing from what you just said.
Yeah. I mean, you and I have some similar background in terms of working out of the gym. I was part of CrossFit for a number of years and trained hard. Sometimes it was morning and evening and coaching a class. And probably between 3 and 6 days a week. And then even some days just tooling around at the gym on another day. And I think back on that time of really aggressively working out towards some sort of goal, which was just general strength conditioning. And my body really loved it. My mind loved it too. The rest days were super important, but 2 rest days together were not good. So that rest day was enough to give space for the body to kind of like, okay, well, I get some time away from here. And sort of the stress level, even though it's good stress, it's still stress to your body. The stress level comes back down. And then it was good to get in the gym another day. But some of those rest days, if I was going to take more than one rest day, it was important to continue to move on those other days.
Mm-hmm.
Just being on, off, on, off, on, off. That wasn't good. I felt the pain when I went all the way off. Yeah. And so sometimes the tendency to become a sort of addicted to the growth mode and the stress that comes with it without taking rest, because if we take too much rest, all of a sudden we feel the pain. So we stay in that growth mode thinking that that's going to be successful. However, that growth mode all on all the time, we're not built for that. Our bodies are not built for that.
Yeah.
They need the time to recover and rebuild. And so the parallel that I see is work hard and then take time and scale it down
Mm-hmm.
to just allow space for the growth to happen. And then continue to amp it up, add on. And that's the best, anatomically, it's the best way to build muscle, press it, stretch, uh, what is the word I'm looking for? Stress it out,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yep.
go as hard as you can possibly go to, to the point of failure, perhaps, and then take some time off,
Yeah.
take a little, but not too much time, because then all of a sudden, you get out of the rhythm, and you lose some momentum, both of which are important. And you can start to lose some of those gains. And over time, even though they tend to stay with you over a period of time, over time, or too much time, they'll just go away entirely.
Yeah.
Over months, years, tens of years. So I think that from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there is that the two sides of being an entrepreneur. One is every entrepreneur has to really prove their mettle when they go through these times of really pressing forward, learning, growing, adding on new ideas, new concepts, new experiences, and then all of a sudden it feels like things dry up a little bit, which is
Yep.
really the opportunity to just take a step back and go, okay, well, what is this training looking like? Where am I headed? What do I need to do next week?
Yeah.
Because I've got something coming up, whatever it is, and staying ahead of those, keeping some goal off in the future, I think is important, because I think an entrepreneur really has to earn, just like a bodybuilder, right? Perhaps you have to earn that moment when all of that training has, paid off,
Mm-hmm.
when it all comes together. An entrepreneur has to do the same thing. You got to earn that. You have to earn the ability to have that company. Um, the flip side of that is that some people don't want to earn it. They don't want to do all of the necessary steps. They don't want to do all the training. They just want the results.
Yeah.
And that is enticing, particularly in this culture, that's an enticing option. And it's almost expected, like at one point in time, we had to make all of our own food, really. And now we can just buy all sorts of varieties. Oh, you want eggs? Great. There's pre-made eggs.
Yeah.
You want egg whites? Great. There's a thing of egg whites, that you can just buy. Like what? So we're
There's a special you saw in the grocery store with 25% off of the wine that you wanted. And
yeah, right. Exactly.
I
Yeah.
forget what that story was about, but anyway, I just remembered.
Yeah. When I bought like 10 bottles because I thought I was going to get a bunch free, and I didn't think I had to buy turkeys with all of them. And nobody needs 10 turkeys.
Not even on Thanksgiving.
Not even on Thanksgiving, it turns out. Yeah, I think both of those things we have to guard against the tendency to think it's supposed to be easy, just because other things have become easy in our lives, and really lean into, I think sometimes are we at a point where we're in one of those, we had a growth mode and then it had to come back, and we're reassessing, and we're establishing the we're going to press to that. Is it I think a person has to be really cognizant of, is it that type of moment, or is it this is not something worth training for, because there's no benefit to being good at it.
Well, yeah, or it's like it's like I've so many times when I've set goals in isolation. That's why I won't set goals in isolation anymore, because you simply have no many times it's very hard uh to set a healthful goal because you don't know what's possible, and you don't really know what's impossible either. You don't, you can say, well, um I'm 44 years old, but I want to play in the NFL. Well, I'm sorry, cousin, it doesn't work that way, right? um you can play football, but you're not going to be playing in the NFL, especially if you've never played before, right? Okay, so what's reasonable, but also what goes beyond just, just stuff that anybody can do. Like, I have a goal of, you know, some people might say, well, I set a goal of using the bathroom today. Well, yeah, you don't have to set that goal. It just happens automatically, right? So what's I think, the difficult thing then becomes, okay, now I know that, that it's not going to happen overnight, and that I'm going to need periods of rest. And okay, I've accepted that. But then what's possible, and what's not only possible, but also the odds are a little bit against me, enough that it's challenging, enough that if I overcame it, it would be, something really worth celebrating. And, in view of all that, now now we're starting to get somewhere in terms of setting a goal that's feasible and intelligent and well thought out. But oh man, I struggle so much to do that when it's just me. Like, if I don't do it in the company of others, I might as well not do it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if let's say somebody's listening to this and they're accepting the premises that we've put forth so far, right? Okay, I need rest, I need intermissions, I need time to pull back and think about what I'm doing. And I've embraced that I'm a 10-year overnight success, okay? And I'm in year 3 or year 1 or year 5 or whatever it is. So it's not happening yet. And I need to be willing to wait that long, or longer maybe. Now what do you do?
I want to go back to something you talked about where we're talking about, is it worth doing what I'm doing? Should I be doing what I'm doing? And how it's helpful to do that with others, to plan with others, to think with others, because we're so often inclined to not understand and fully see, what our house looks like from the outside when we're sitting on the inside. We're like, hey, I made this house so inviting. Why doesn't everybody come over for parties? And you don't realize that the grass is unkept and the leaves are overgrown and nobody wants to go to your dumpy little house. So there's a Japanese concept called Ikigai, which I don't know if that's really um hold on, I'm gonna put this on its own tab. If that's really the way to say it, but something like that. And it is a sort of Japanese life planning concept.
Yep.
Maybe you through this.
I've heard of it. I have not been through it. No.
All right. Well, we've talked. I don't know what we've talked about or we haven't talked about. Or so for our listeners, you might want to go to the video and view this. Got us up on the screen. Ikigai. And don't ask me how it's translated. I can't remember. It's something like, have a great life or something. But up at the top, we have these 4 concentric four circles, overlapping circles. And they overlap in a couple different areas. So what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. If you made a list of everything that you love, and then made a second list of everything that the world needs, you made another list of what you could be paid for, and you made a list of what you're good at. Essentially, the intersection of those matters or those lists will help you identify what your passion is, what your mission is, what your vocation could be, what your profession probably should be. And in the middle of it all, if you can find something that works in all of those areas, then that's something that's worth really moving toward.
Mm.
That is your best and highest use, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
as some would term that in other methods of planning. Your best and highest use, Ikigai. So if a person's evaluating, should I be doing this? Is it in one of these circles, or is it working you to one of these circles? Is it building that muscle?
Mm-hmm.
So if a person says, hey, I really love making cupcakes, great. Is it also on the list that the world needs more cupcakes? Is it also on the list that you could get paid to make cupcakes? And are you good at making cupcakes? If
Yeah.
you are those things, then do it. However, let's say you love making cupcakes, and you are good at making cupcakes, but nobody's going to pay you for it, then that's passion.
Yeah.
That's your passion. Go do it. Make cupcakes. It's gonna add value to your life. But if you can't get paid for it, certainly don't make it a vocation and profession.
Yeah.
I think that in answering the question of is it something worth doing, this sort of exercise is worth going through to figure out where does whatever I want to work on or work toward, where does it fit in these circles to me? How does it add value to my life? I think an exercise like this can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned Ikigai because this morning I was thinking of another Japanese practice called Kintsugi or Kintsugi. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, Kintsugi. It's in my book.
Okay, that's right.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Could be. It's
Now available on Amazon.
go ahead. Kintsugi.
But, at the start I mentioned that I was good at untying the knots. And when I watch Kintsugi, that's another thing that serves as a good metaphor for something I've found myself to be pretty good at, which is helping people put themselves back together when they feel like they're falling apart.
Okay.
I like to say, I'm not the life of the party. I'm the guy you call after you figure out that the party wasn't going to scratch your itch and you're feeling like a train wreck.
There you go. I put an image up on the screen for Kintsugi. So
Yep.
for our viewers and listeners, if you're not sure what Kintsugi is, it is a Japanese art form for pottery. You've seen it look like this, where they deliberately break the pottery and then join it back together, typically with some sort of gold.
Yeah.
Which joins that pottery together. The idea is that it is more beautiful. Pottery is more beautiful for having been broken, which, clearly those who wax philosophically among us, naturally overlay the human experience more beautiful for having been broken.
There's nobody like that on this podcast, though, for sure. Nobody philosophical at all. We're very much matter of fact, practical, just, A plus B equals C. So, but yeah, no, I was thinking about that. And I was thinking in the spiritual sense, I'm good at it. I do love doing it. People need it and they'll pay for it. And it's funny how often it happens, or bits and pieces of it happen through what I do at Emissary. It's funny how people have gone through experiences, lived through things. They want to tell a story, but it's scattered in pieces in their mind, just like the plate that you drop on the ground and smashes into pieces. It's all over the place. And they can tell you what they lived through, and they can tell you how they felt when they lived through it, and they can tell you who the characters were, and they can tell you what the backstory was. But how do they connect that to something that is not just meaningful to them, it's also meaningful to a reader. And so I see that play out in what I do. And I can see that, I can get paid for it and the world does need it. And I'm good at it. And I love doing it. We have solved the world's problems.
I think people struggle with it a lot, though. The search for uh, the search for is the effort that I'm applying in this area worth it? I think that's a natural human thought for anybody who goes beyond the surface level of just sort of skating through life. And it's something that we need to evaluate. Um, and I like to bring up Kintsugi because part of the effort of life is putting back together sometimes broken things.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can see that it is not just broken and we have to, repair it as though it came back together perfectly. What if we said, no, that's not the point. The point is that it can be repaired. And sometimes that repair can be emphasized, can be pulled out. And that is the key differentiator. That is the power in that piece. That is where the beauty lies in the fact that it was put together knowingly broken. I have a mug. I just put it back together. It was one of those ceramic mugs. That it's printed on the outside. It's a band. It's the Drew Holcomb band, and it's a cool little. It's like a camping mug, and I really like that mug. It has some, Drew Holcomb has some memories for me, and that type of mug, I just like feel a little rugged with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other day I dropped it, broke it right down the middle, and also took some chip, like a big old chip out the side. And I was like, oh no. And I was a little miffed. And I thought, okay, well, this mug is broken. What am I going to do with this mug? I can't use it again. It's a ceramic mug, and whatever I'm going to put in there to repair it, I'm not going to drink glue or whatever. It's going to hold this thing together from here on out.
Yeah.
Nor would I trust I wouldn't trust the health of it, and I wouldn't trust it to hold it, putting hot coffee in every day. Plus it's got a chip out of it on the side that I like to drink out of.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to get rid of it. What do I do with it? And so I decided I will eventually use it for plants. I'll put something in it in sort of an eclectic decoupage sort of planter, and it can hold plants. It's broken. The broken mug. I get it. But now there's a memory about how I got that mug, the memories of that music, the many times I'd used that mug, the day I broke that mug, and how I reused that mug for something else because it was okay that it wasn't perfect. In fact, it might even serve its purpose better because now I've got a life story that I can add to that mug. And now it's not just a plant. It's not just a place to walk or view or look, spend time, relax. Now it's surrounded by life stories as well, which for me, that's one of the things that I enjoy. I enjoy those moments of building stories about life, my life, other people's lives, having some time.
The other thing that occurs to me here, we were in Vancouver Island the week before last. And part of the reason I went there was to, in accordance with my late parents' wishes, scatter their ashes into the Pacific Ocean Bay there on Salt Spring Island in BC, which was where the last place that they lived together before my mom died. And then my dad died about 7 years later. And so my sister and I were there, and after we did all that, we all went out to lunch and dinner a couple times and hung out for a while and spent time together. And it was great reconnecting with her. Hadn't seen her in about 7 years. But during one of the meals, she was recounting the story of coming to my graduation for basic training in the U.S. Army. Now, this is 2003. This is over 20 years ago now. And it's funny how that story unfolded. I never asked her this at the time. It didn't occur to me, but it's funny how that story unfolded when I was. It was funny to hear her version of the story, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's funny to hear her take on what happened, because I was, I'm locked inside in the barracks with these other soldiers. I don't know what it's like to be the civilian sibling of a person graduating from basic training. And so she told this story of how they came to Fort Leonard Wood, which is where I graduated in Missouri. And they didn't really have a lot in the way of like directions. Like the military had provided them with the location, and this is the time and the date and all that, and they came. But once they were on the base, they kind of had to just follow some signs, and there weren't that many of them, and so it was kind of vague. And they got to this auditorium, and they weren't sure if it was the right one, and I hadn't communicated with them much beyond telling them where to look up the information and that kind of thing, because you couldn't, right? You could only communicate like once a week with your family. You could call them, right? But they only let you use the phones every so often. So apparently, I never knew this until last week. Apparently, they went into the auditorium and they had no idea. And I guess I never told them. Maybe I meant it to be a bit of a surprise, but it just never occurred to me to tell them that I had been picked as the MC, right? Surprise, surprise. The guy with the voice that sounds like Ted Koppel was picked to be the MC. So they're sitting there and the lights go out, and they've never been to something like this in their life. We're not a military family. They don't know what to expect. And out onto the stage walks me, their son, their brother, right? Dressed in a Class A uniform, shaved head, right? And I take the podium, and I'm the MC. Like I'm on stage for most of the graduation, and I'm directing it and vocalizing it and all this sort of stuff. And I guess like they just never told me, and I never asked. They said they couldn't believe how overcome they were with pride and admiration for everything. And apparently my mom wept, with just overwhelming pride and joy seeing me do that. And my sister, and there was a girl who came, one of my sister's friends, after I left home, came and lived with my parents for a while because of a bad family situation. So she came to it as well. And the two of them were just tickled pink and could hardly contain themselves. And, were letting out cheers and hoops and hollers for me and all that. And I never noticed any of that. I didn't think it was them, and I didn't think it was about me. The reason I'm saying this, though, this is a nice little flashback for me, but the reason I'm pointing this out is something else that we've been including in our recipe, baking this into what we want to do for founders. And that is that you can't just tell your own story or your own version of the story. You've also got to involve how other people perceived it, I think, to make it really well-rounded. And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about the mug and about the Ikigai, right? You have to know You have to be able to, sometimes you can't, you can be in a situation like that and you can't see the way forward because you're not doing it with other people. You're not getting the perspective from the people who can see that your lawn needs work and you haven't cleaned up, your house is looking kind of dilapidated on the outside. So, but when I heard my sister say that, it changed it changed me just a little bit in a good way to think about, well, they really did appreciate that much more than I thought they did or realized. And if that had that effect on them, then what kind of effect did it have on all the other people who knew me at the time? That never bothered to vocalize it, or I never asked them, what do you think of me now that I'm a soldier? And I think we could all do to ask the same kind of questions about the things we're doing when we're wondering if it's worth it. I'm a professional writer. Do you think what I do is worth it? Do you think what I do is meaningful? Do you think what I do is worth the sacrifice and the cost and all the waiting game that I'm doing? Do you think do you think I'm good at it? Do you think do you think the world needs it? Do you think the world will pay for it? And so yesterday, you and I were working on some stuff that we're doing for this offer. And I said, after we hung up, I got active on it immediately. And I said, I'm going to put this together and I'm going to do my best, but I'm also going to send it to a bunch of people and just say, if you were the person we intend to receive this, what would your reaction be? And I've had some feedback on it, and it's been positive. It's also been constructive. There's also been people who say, well, I would do this just a little bit differently, but I think overall it's very good. I think you just need to tweak this and change this and move this around and maybe not say so much here. Okay, that's good. That's what I need to know is what is the reaction? Because so often I don't it's the age of the internet, right? Send a message out there, you put all this time and effort into a post and nobody reacts to it or appears to react to it.
Yeah, it's hard to measure that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole bubble of what the world needs, I think is kind of what you're talking about there. And I think that the people who become really good at assessing that are simply really good at listening for echoes.
Yes.
So they're standing on the edge of a canyon, let's say, and listening at the sounds.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming, what resonates, where's that frequency where it's like, oh man, everybody hears that. And they're rushing towards it, want to see it. They're reacting to it. Sometimes sometimes we're bad at that because we are ignorant and less experienced than we need to be about what it is that we think we're doing. I used to do these startup weekends with Techstars and Google for Entrepreneurs, and on a Friday night we'd all gather around, maybe 40 or 50 people gather around, and we'd break off into teams. Everybody pitch an idea. You break off into then teams, and the rule was you had to have other people join your team to be able to work on your project. Mm-hmm. Then on Sunday afternoon, after we have 5, 6 teams built up, on Sunday afternoon, everybody would present their concepts. Now, from Friday night to Sunday, they should have talked to people about whether other people liked that idea. They should have built something. They came up with a presentation. They might have had a pivot in the middle of it because they discovered what they were working on didn't work, when they got it to the point of trying to test it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these were software applications. Some of them they were going to build stuff. Some were service companies. Well, there was a guy in one of the teams young business guy, active in the team. Friday night, they worked hard trying to develop a concept, and they had agreed initially, and then it just sort of fizzled out. They just could not figure out what is this thing that we're going to work on. Then they all, went home, came back Saturday morning. Still chaos. Did not have a concept. Midday Saturday, still don't have a concept. Now now we are at a critical juncture. You now have 24, maybe 30 hours to work on this. That assumes you do not sleep. So
Yeah.
you are way, way, way behind other teams. It's to the point where you might as well disband and join other teams because you're going to have nothing. This kid he's itching to tell me something. I was like, okay, what do you buy? And it's like, I got an idea. It's amazing. It's the greatest idea ever. And I'm so afraid to tell people because I don't want to take it. And I was like, I assure you, your idea is not that stellar. What is it? And, because it's not to downplay his concept, the idea, but implementation is everything. Everybody's got an idea. Go to any party. Everybody's got a business idea that they're never going to do.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to, they don't want to take the effort. They just want to get the results. They wouldn't know where to start anyhow. They're just spitballing, right? Or in this case, it's not a good idea. His concept as a young man who started traveling for business, he began by saying, well, you know how you have to put your shampoo in smaller bottles rather than the big bottles. What if we made small bottles and you could take your big bottle and empty it in small bottle? It looks like I was trying to be gracious and listen to this. And I was like, are you serious? Like, that's your concept? I was like, they've been doing that for 40 years at Walgreens.
Just have to go to CVS or something. And
It's like, these things are 99 cents or less. And I said, so unless you're going to make a faster, better, cheaper little bottle, which you're probably not, what are you going to line it in gold? Make some super fantastic bottle. You're going to extrude aluminum. What are you doing? And he was like, oh, are you serious? I was like, yeah, absolutely. You could go down to Walmart right now and pick up a 4-pack in a whole little container. So he was so inexperienced that he kept his cards close to his chest, had been ruminating on an idea that someday he is going to launch this thing to the world and it's going to be great, having no idea that the world does not need it. Certainly not going to pay for it. He should never have dreamed so hard about it. Certainly shouldn't withhold it. But it was the inexperience and the immaturity to know that part of making a great idea is telling other people about it. It is testing it in the marketplace because other people probably know something and it could be pivotal to your concept that you hear that.
Yeah.
That you either don't do what you're doing or shift directions, because as soon as you scream that off into the world, they're not going to scream back, yes, give me that. They're going to say, are you kidding me? I don't want that. Or they're just not going to come, they're going to give you no feedback.
They're not
going to respond at all. So that idea of what resonates, what echoes, you have to speak it out. You have to get it out there, because if it really is, what does the world need? You have to hear back from them.
Yeah.
Unless or until you become very experienced, and then you might be 50% of the way there just through good intuition and spending time in the marketplace. You might be a little bit more, but there's nobody who doesn't refine it as soon as it gets out in the marketplace. So like you're talking about, we have a good understanding of a lot of aspects of what might work. So we produce something, test it in the marketplace, see how does this stick? Do we get good results, immediate results? Is there pull through? We've talked about that before. Or are we pressing? If we're pressing, the world doesn't need it, because they wouldn't have to press if they needed it.
Yeah. Yeah. And pushing gets exhausting, but pulling is exciting, right? When people are gravitationally drawn towards you.
Yeah.
And I remember that from my networking time. It's not that there's no effort involved at all. but it's effort in the right places applied consistently time after time. And so, one example I would tell people is not for profit is for profit. By which I meant by participating in nonprofits, not with the express motive of profiting, but just as a byproduct of being a businessman involved in nonprofits, talking to mainly other entrepreneurs and business people, was where I got some of my most solid successes in the occupation I was in at the time, which was insurance sales.
Huh.
In fact, the largest client I ever got, I got by being involved in the local Miss America pageant. They didn't pay me to do that, and I didn't want anything from it, and I didn't go there to solicit business. It was just something that people asked me to do, and I was willing to do, and I did it well, and I enjoyed it. They needed it, and except I didn't get paid for it. But I did. I did get paid for it, right? Indirectly. In fact, I got the largest account I ever got. Turned out to be my co-hostess at one of those pageants, who was a very successful executive with a large American franchise corporation, and owned a great deal of property and had businesses on the side that she ran. And lucky me, her insurance agent had recently gone out of business, and now she had these policies and no one to oversee them or manage them. So guess who got to take them over? I did. And that's an example that comes to mind when you put yourself out there and apply yourself in the right ways, apply pressure in the right ways, right? Because you do have to exert effort when we're talking about creating pull, so that people eventually start coming to you and saying, I've heard about you. So-and-so told me about you. I was referred to you by this person, said I should work with you. This person said you're the best in town. Right? All of that is a product of applying the push in the right places. And so as we're working on what we're working on, we're saying, okay, we've pushed this boulder far enough. And does it yield net zero? No, there's some profit in it. Is it enough to do it over and over again consistently and build something on it? Probably not. But not because we're under delivering. It's simply because it's just not the right boulder to push. So you go back and you say, okay, let's recalibrate. Let's think this through. What does the market need? Can we verify what they need, or can we get a pretty good idea of what they need? Do we have experience of seeing them need it? And can we offer it to them? And as those things begin to come into focus, then you say, okay, let's try pushing this boulder a little bit and see what we get. And if you get a little bit of traction, okay, let's push a little bit more. Maybe it starts to snowball a little faster, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe it starts to pick up some momentum and you're rolling along, but you realize this boulder is only going to roll so fast. There's no big steep downhill to pick up a lot of speed. Or maybe you look and you see, wow, there's Mount Everest right in front of us. We're not getting up that. You know what? Let's go find a flatter surface.
Yeah, I think one of the thoughts that comes to my mind is, the journey requires iteration.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea of testing, finding out something doesn't quite work, change it, retest it, change it, retest it, change it, retest it. It's that process is necessary. And if you can come to expect it and invite it and then do it faster, that's where some real magic can happen.
Yeah.
And I think also in a particular industry, it's important to stay in that industry for some time, because what the world needs is not readily is sometimes not readily evident.
Yes.
And so spending time in an industry, you begin to see through, some experience, perhaps, uh, a more clear view of what's working and what's not working. And so I think sometimes too often people come into the industries and they're like, hey, we're going to blaze a trail. Uh, and, they've just never done it before. And so
Sure.
they think, oh, it's not working. Well, yeah, it's not going to work that way, but you don't
No.
know because this is your first day on the job. So the uh, I think there's a concept when they hire people that they don't really become used for another 2 years, because it's the first year is just sort of getting their feet under themselves, and then there might be some sort of proficiency that comes out 2 years later.
Yeah.
The Why should it being an entrepreneur be any different? That a couple years in is when you start to become proficient, but not proficient in everything, just proficient in what you've been spending time doing. And yet there are all sorts of other aspects of that business and what people will pay for and want that may not be yet, they may not be seen yet. So
Yeah.
I think falling in, not resigning yourself, but just understanding that the iterative nature of entrepreneurship, that's just normal.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, then do not be an entrepreneur. Go buy a franchise and run that franchise exactly how the manual says, uh, or go get a job and
Yeah.
do what your job requires you to do.
Yeah.
But don't be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I'm, I'm, there's somewhere in the recesses of my mind is a story of a company. I think most people would know if you said it, and I'm just forgetting who it is, but they started out with one idea and they were pretty sold on that idea. Like, this is really gonna, you know, blaze a trail. They found out the market was like, yawn, right?
Mhm.
But there was some element that was exciting. Like, there was some sub element of what they did that was exciting. Some component of what they were offering that the market said, now that is interesting. This other stuff you're doing over here could care less, but this is interesting. Can you do that? And at the time, of course, they couldn't because they hadn't done the iterations. So they went and did the iterations, and then that product took off like wildfire. And so that's what they became known for. But they weren't originally that company. The company that everybody knows now is not the company that started.
Yeah.
And I just can't think of I'm sure there's a couple of
Well,
big name brands you could name that's how they started, and I just don't know which ones they are.
let me give you an example. Ball jars,
Ball
right?
jars.
Or ball jars, the glass containers that put the lids on for canning.
I guess I've never noticed the brand, but anyway, go ahead.
The major brand is Ball.
Okay.
So Ball Corporation was founded in 1880, in Buffalo, New York, as the Wooden Jacket Can Company, and it produced cans encased in wood. It was founded by the Ball brothers. That was 1880. Okay. 1886, they incorporated as Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing. That's 1886.
No.
But first, it was tin cans encased in wood. 6 years later, it's glass.
Yeah.
The first, in 1973, 90 years later, roughly, it became publicly traded. Just prior to that, in 1956, so maybe not just, but a handful of years before that, right? They formed Ball Brothers Research Corporation, which became Ball Aerospace and Technologies Corporation, which is an aerospace and defense manufacturing company.
Mm-hmm.
In 1993, they exited the home canning business. So they sold the name Ball, and they don't make that stuff anymore. They make aluminum packaging, and they make defense. They're a defense manufacturer. They make weapons. Now, Ball Corporation is well known in the canning business. And I bet nobody knows. There's probably no housewife or whoever is canning who understands that Ball does not make that glass. They make weapons, but they're the standard.
Yeah.
And so the it's okay once you have got some momentum, it's okay to change things mid-stride and go with wherever you're getting value. In addition, there might be certain milestones which open up new opportunities, right? Like being a defense manufacturer, being a publicly traded company, so you have some resources to be a defense manufacturer, right, is important. You might not need that to be in the home canning business.
You might not, yeah.
Certainly after 100 years, right? So the entrepreneurial spirit is one of identifying opportunity in the marketplace, moving to that opportunity rather than getting stuck in what you're doing simply because that's what you're doing, even if you like it and you're good at it. There might be something better. There might be something that the world wants to buy.
Yeah.
And if you can deliver that, if you're a true, I don't want to say true, that's loaded. If you're a classic entrepreneur, you move to the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that requires iteration. It requires growth. It requires rest. It requires planning what the next stretch is, what I'm going to work on next, where weaknesses are at, where strengths are at, and constant evaluation.
And with that, why are you still trying to figure this out in isolation if you're listening to or watching this? Now's the time to look us up on the Thinker Growth community and leave a comment or send over your information if you would like to get some outside eyes on what you're doing and how you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And are you thinking about it clearly enough? I think that's a big part of what we exist for, is to be one of those first lines of defense before you go overboard chasing something that you might love and you're really good at, but the world doesn't give a rip.
Yeah.
And you're going to crash and burn and feel very bad about yourself. And there's no need for you to do that when you can easily solicit the expert opinions of people who have been doing entrepreneurship at any rate for quite some time, as you've heard on this podcast. So go to thinkergrowth.com and sign up to be a part of the community and get in touch with us. If you've got an idea that you think is going to change the world, you have a responsibility to become very good at communicating it and explaining what it is and who it benefits and how it helps and et cetera, et cetera. And we would love to be a part of that. So great to have you
Good stuff.
on the show again this week, Jason. Any final thoughts for the good of the order?
Final thoughts, good of the order. Use the rest periods. When you feel like you need to rest, it's okay. Use the rest periods. Maybe take the opportunity then to reach out to somebody else who's on the same journey. So I would just, I think, reiterate what you're talking about there. It's okay to rest. Use it actively by reaching out to help figure out what comes next.
Amen. Let it be so.
All right, bud. Sounds good. Hey, it's always good to see you on the workshop.
Yeah. See you next week.
All righty.